I don't know if anyone else does this, but one of my favorite ways to relax is to go for late night drives. I've been doing it for years. Something about the empty roads, the quiet, and the hum of the engine just clears my head. It's my little escape when life feels overwhelming. I'm not much of a social person, so instead of going out with friends, I drive. Some people jog, others meditate, I drive. I started the habit back when I was in college. Stress would pile up, exams, work, relationships. One night I grabbed my keys and just went. No destination, no plan, just me and the road. It became my thing. Even now, years later, I still do it. After a long day, especially when my mind won't stop racing, I'll get in the car and take off for an hour or two. It was one of those nights. I'd had a crappy day at work and my brain wouldn't let it go. So around 11 PM, I grabbed my jacket and headed out. I wasn't going far, just the usual road through some quiet neighborhoods and then a stretch of open road outside of town. It was New Year's Eve, so I expected some noise, fireworks, drunk people, the usual. But once I got out of the more crowded areas, it was peaceful. The fireworks were faint pops in the distance and the streets were almost completely empty. It was perfect. About 30 minutes into the drive, I noticed something strange. I was passing by a row of houses when I saw someone standing on the sidewalk right under a streetlight. It caught my attention because, well, it was freezing outside. Who just stands out there at midnight in the middle of winter? At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for a ride or heading home from a party, but he didn't move. He just stood there. I didn't get a good look at his face, but something about the way that he was standing completely still gave me a weird feeling. I shook it off and kept driving. People are weird sometimes, right? Maybe he was just drunk. But then, maybe 5 minutes later, I saw another person standing on the side of the road. Same deal. He wasn't under a streetlight this time, so it was harder to make out details, but he was just standing there, still as a statue. That's when I started to feel uneasy. It wasn't like I was in a bad area. This was a quiet, safe neighborhood. But two people standing like that? It was odd. I told myself I was overthinking, maybe letting my imagination get the best of me. I kept going, trying to focus on the drive, but I couldn't shake the feeling. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in my peripheral vision made my pulse quicken. About 10 minutes later, I turned onto a stretch of road that cuts through some woods. It's always been my favorite part of the drive, pitch dark except for my headlights, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like the only person in the world. Normally, it's calming, but that night, it just wasn't. As I drove, I thought I saw something in my rearview mirror. It was faint, like a shadow moving in the distance. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, but then it happened again. This time, closer. I slowed down, trying to get a better look, but the road behind me was empty. Still, the unease grew. I wasn't scared exactly, just off. Like my instincts were trying to tell me something wasn't right. I decided to head back home. The drive wasn't helping me relax anymore. I made a U-turn and started back towards town. About halfway there, I saw him. A man standing in the middle of the road. I slammed on the brakes, my heart leaping into my throat. My car skidded to a stop, maybe 20 feet from him. He didn't move, just stood there, staring. I honked the horn, but he didn't flinch. "Are you kidding me?" I muttered, my hands gripping the wheel. I rolled down the window slightly and yelled, "Hey, get out of the road." Nothing. That's when I noticed he was wearing a mask. Not a Halloween mask or something fun. This was a plain white mask like the kind you'd see in an old school horror movie. Panic started to creep in. I locked the doors and kept my foot on the brake, unsure of what to do. Should I call the cops? Drive around him? Before I could decide, he moved. Not toward me. He just stepped to the side slowly and stood on the shoulder of the road. I didn't waste any time. I hit the gas and sped past him, my hands shaking on the wheel. As I drove away, I looked in the rearview mirror. He was still standing there, watching me. When I got home, I locked every door and window and double-checked them all, just to be safe. I tried to tell myself it was just some weirdo messing around, maybe someone coming home for a party, but that mask. It's been weeks and I still can't stop thinking about it. Who was he? What was he doing out there? Was he waiting for someone or something? I've gone on drives since then, but I stick to well-lit streets now. No more back roads, no more dark woods. And every time I pass a finger on the side of the road, my chest tightens and I grip the wheel a little tighter. I don't know what would have happened if I'd gotten out of the car that night, and honestly, I don't want to know. I've always had this thing about driving at night. It started when I was in my early 20s. I don't really know why, but there is something about the quiet, empty roads that calms me down. My life's been hectic lately. Work stress, relationship problems, family stuff. So whenever it all gets too much, I just grab my keys, hop in the car and drive. No destination, no agenda, just me and the road. It's my way of hitting pause. Last week, I had one of those days where everything felt like it was falling apart. Work had been brutal, my boss kept breathing down my neck, and my girlfriend and I had a huge argument about something stupid. So around midnight, I grabbed my jacket and decided I needed to clear my head. I didn't plan to go far, just a loop around the quieter parts of town and maybe head towards the outskirts where the streets are emptier. I cranked up some music, rolled down the windows a bit despite the cold and started driving. At first it was perfect, just me, the hum of the car and the dark empty streets. I drove past the rows of houses, their windows glowing with soft lights. A couple of stray cats darted across the road at one point, but other than that, it was uneventful. About 30 minutes in, I decided to take a different route. I wasn't feeling ready to go home just yet, so I took a turn that led me towards the industrial part of town. This area is pretty desolate at night, lots of old warehouses and empty lots. It's not the kind of place you want to get out and walk around, but for driving, it's perfect. I was heading towards an overpass when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. Under the bridge, there was a guy pacing back and forth. I couldn't see him clearly. It was dark and the shadows from the bridge made it worse. Something about the way he was moving didn't seem normal. I slowed down a bit, not enough to draw attention, but enough to get a better look. He was hunched over, wearing a hoodie pulled up so I couldn't see his face. He kept glancing around nervously, like he was waiting for someone. At first I thought he was homeless or just high, but something about him made me hesitate. My gut told me to keep driving, but curiosity got the better of me. I pulled over a little further down the road, turned off my lights and waited. A few minutes later, another person showed up. This guy was taller, stockier and definitely not dressed for the weather. He didn't look like he belonged in this part of town either. He walked up to the first guy and they started talking, or arguing really. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but their body language was tense. The first guy kept gesturing wildly and the second guy kept shaking his head, his arms crossed. Then the second guy took a step closer, and that's when I saw it. He pulled out a gun. My stomach dropped. The first guy froze, his hands going up like he was trying to calm the other one down. They kept arguing, but now the pacing guy looked desperate, pleading. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to call attention to myself, but I also couldn't just sit there and watch whatever was about to happen. I reached for my phone to call 911, but before I could even unlock it, the taller guy raised the gun and fired. The sound was deafening, even from where I was sitting. The pacing guy crumpled to the ground instantly. I froze. My heart was racing and I could barely breathe. The shooter stood there for a moment, looking around like he was checking if anyone had seen him. I slouched down in my seat, praying he wouldn't notice my car. After what felt like forever, he started walking away, disappearing into the shadows. As soon as I was sure he was gone, I threw my car into drive and floored it. My tires screeched against the pavement and I cursed myself for making so much noise. What if he heard me? What if he came back? I didn't stop until I was back in my driveway. Even then, I sat in the car for a few minutes trying to calm down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. When I finally went inside, I locked every door and window in the house. I even checked them twice just to be sure. I didn't sleep at all that night. My mind kept replaying that scene under the bridge, the gunshot, the way the guy collapsed. I kept wondering if I should have done something differently. Should I have called the cops sooner? Should I have driven away the moment I saw them? The next morning I decided I needed to report it. I couldn't live with myself if I didn't at least try to do the right thing. But when I opened my front door, I found a piece of paper taped to it. It was a note scrawled in a messy handwriting. If you talk, you're next. I stared at it for a long time, my stomach twisting into knots. How did he know where I lived? Had he followed me? I don't know what to do now. I haven't told anyone, not the cops, not my friends, not even my girlfriend. Every time I think about making a report, I see that note in my head and hear the gunshot all over again. For now, I'm trying to lay low and act normal. I haven't gone for a drive since that night. I don't think I ever will again.